Welcome back. We shall read section 3. I will read, okay? The Assyrians. The vocabulary is Nebuchadnezzar, province, Kavarian astronomer. The Assyrians. About 1,000 years after Hammurabi, a new empire arose in Mesopotamia. It was founded by a people called the Assyrians, who lived in north near the Tigris River. Assyria had first raised fertile valleys that attracted outside invaders. To defend their land, the Assyrians built a large army around 900 BC. They began taking over the rest of Mesopotamia. Why were the Assyrians strong? The Assyrian armies were well organized. At its core were groups of foot soldiers armed with spears and daggers. Other soldiers were experts at using bows and arrows. The army also had chariot riders and soldiers who fought on horseback. This fearsome and mighty force was the first large army to use iron weapons. For centuries, iron had been used for tools, but it was too soft to serve as a material for weapons. Then a people called Hittites, who lived northwest of Assyria, developed a way of making iron stronger. They heated iron ore, hammered it, and rapidly cooled it. The Assyrians learned this technique from the Hittites. They produced iron weapons that were stronger than those were made of copper or tin. The Assyrians were ferocious warriors. To attack cities, they tunneled under walls or climbed over them on ladders. They loaded tree trunks onto movable platforms and used them as battering rams to knock down city gates. Once a city was captured, the Assyrians set fire on its buildings. They also carried away its people and goods. Anyone who resisted the Assyrian rules was punished. The Assyrians drove people from their land and moved them into foreign territory. Then they brought in new settlers and forced them to pay heavy taxes. A well-organized government. The Assyrian kings had to be strong to rule their large empire. By about 650 BC, the empire stretched from the Persian Gulf in the east to Egypt's Nile River in the west. The capital was at Nineveh on the Tigris River. Assyrian kings divided the empire into provinces. Oh, it's raining. Or political districts. They chose officials to govern each province. These officials collected taxes and enforced the king's laws. Assyrian kings built roads to join all parts of their empire. Government solo soldiers were posted at stations along the way to protect traders from bandits. Messengers on government business used the station to rest and change horses. Life in Assyria. The Assyrians lived pretty much like other Mesopotamians. Their writing was based on Babylonian writing, and they worshipped many of the same gods. Their laws were similar, but lawbreakers often faced more brutal and cruel punishment in Assyria. As builders, the Assyrians showed great skill. They erected large temples and palaces that filled with wall carvings and statues. The Assyrians also produced and collected literature. One of the world's first libraries was in Nineveh. It held 25,000 tablets of stories and songs to the gods. Modern historians had learned much about ancient civilization from this library. Assyria's cruel treatment of people led to many rebellions. About 650 BC, the Assyrians began fighting each other over who would be their next king. A group of people called the Chaldeans seized the opportunity to rebel. They captured Nineveh in 612 BC and the Assyrian Empire soon crumbled. Pause. The Chaldeans want to build an empire led by King Nebuchadnezzar. They controlled all of Mesopotamia from 605 BC to 562 BC. The city of Babylon. Most of the Babylonian Chaldeans were descendants of Babylonian people who made up the Hammurabi Empire about 1,200 years earlier. They rebuilt the city of Babylon as the glorious center of their empire. Babylon quickly became the world's largest and richest city. It was surrounded by a brick wall so wide that 2 chariots could pass on a road on top, built into the wall at 100 yards. Interval were towers where soldiers kept watch. Large palaces and temples stood in the city's center. A huge ziggurat reached more than 300 feet into the sky. Another marvel, invisible from any point in Babylon, was an immense staircase of greenery, the hanging gardens at the king's palaces. These were terraces. Gardens showcased large trees and masses of flowering vines and other beautiful plants. A pump brought in water from the garden from a nearby river. Nebuchadnezzar built the garden to please his wife, who missed the mountains and plants of her homeland in the northwest. One Greek historian in the 400 BC described the beauty of Babylon. He wrote, "In magnificence, there is no other city that approaches it." Outside the center of Babylon stood houses and marketplaces. Their artisans made pottery, cloth, baskets, and jewelry. They sold their wares to passing caravans or group of traveling merchants. Because Babylon was located on a major trade route between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea, it became rich from trade. Babylon was also a center of science like earlier people in Mesopotamia. The Chaldeans believed that changes in the sky revealed the plans of the gods. Their astronomers, people who studied the heavenly bodies, mapped the stars, the planets, and the phases of the moon. Chaldeans made one of the first sundials and were the first to have a 7-day week. Why did the empire fall? As time passed, the Chaldeans began to lose power. Their power, they found it hard to control the people they have conquered. In 539 BC, Persians from the mountain to the northeast, captured Babylon. Mesopotamia became part of the new Persian Empire. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.